Since 1914, we are men of vision, men of service, men of culture, men of leadership. Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, Incorporated.
Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Brother Odie Mitchell, and I am the Director of Education for the Phi Beta Sigma alumni chapter of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, Incorporated. Today, we will present our second part of a two-part series of educational information sessions designed to help our young people and parents by providing access to information to help them gain academic access and greater educational opportunities. Joining us also today is our brother, Dr. Theo Files. He is the Director of Education for the Western Region of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. He'll be joining us today and co-facilitating this workshop with me. Brother Theo, did you want to introduce yourself? Say hello.
Hey everyone, Dr. Theo Files here. Excited to be here today. I'll be clicking the buttons in the background as well. But feel free to join us by adding your questions directly in the comments of social media, so you can find this stream on YouTube at Los Angeles Sigmas as well as on Facebook. So join us there, ask your questions, and we look forward to helping you answer some of those questions as well.
All right, thank you, Brother Theo. So joining us today is Terri Haywood. Terri has a BA in English from UCLA. She has a Master of Arts in Mass Communication from California State University, Northridge. She has over 20 years in executive leadership training. She works with Family Development Credential Program at Los Angeles County Office of Education and North Los Angeles County Regional Center. She has 15 years of doing parent education for LAUSD schools at Cowan Open Charter as well as LACES. She's trained as a parent ambassador for UCLA's Early Education Academic Outreach Program, or EAOP. She's part of the selection committee and advisor for UCLA's Vice Provost Initiative and for pre-scholars. And she also has 5 years as a college coach for high school juniors and seniors. She's going to be presenting for us today. This presentation will be being live streamed via YouTube. It's also being recorded for future use in our educational archives. If you're joining us today, we will be taking questions either from the chat or live. So feel free to join us and log your questions as we move along. So Terri, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And it's so great to be here and to welcome all of you to learn more about the college process. One thing Mr. Mitchell didn't mention is that I have 3 kids. Two of them are currently in college. My youngest is as a freshman, just finished her freshman year at Southern University and A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My second child is a rising junior in UCLA, majoring in public affairs. And my oldest child graduated last year, also from UCLA, with a degree in econ. So I've had a lot of experience, not only helping other kids, but also helping my own go through this process. And what we'd kind of like to cover today is, first, I'm just going to spend some time going on of an overview of the college process. I'm going to be primarily focusing on schools in California, but the systems and the way that the California college system is laid out is going to be very similar in no matter what state you're a part of or what state you go to or live in, I should say. And so what we're laying out today won't just apply to California, but to states or schools across the nation. Then we're going to really get into some eligibility requirements, like what specifically are colleges looking for when you apply to their university. And finally, we're going to talk about costs, because everybody wants to know, how much does it cost to go to college? How much money do I need to save or prepare for? And so we're going to go through all of the different sources for receiving money in terms of financial aid and scholarships, but also we're definitely going to cover what you need to prepare for, especially for that senior year of high school, because a lot of people don't think about that even before they go to college. So let's start with just a general overview of the kind of degrees that you can get. So in high school, you're going to go to high school for 4 years, and you come out if you finish with a diploma. From there, you can go to a community college or to a 4-year university. If you go to a community college, you go for 2 years typically, and you can earn an associate degree. At a university, you would earn a bachelor's degree after going for 4 years. And then from there, if you want to go on for even more education, you can go to work on your master's degree. And that would be usually another 2 years, or a PhD, a medical degree, or a Juris Doctor degree. So those are additional degrees that you can go after. And those doctorate degrees usually are 3-year programs. Sometimes you can do it in 2, but usually they're 3-year programs. And of course, for medical school, it's even longer than that. Next slide, please. Why should you go to college? Well, there's an old adage, the more you learn, the more you earn. And if you can just look at this bottom slide, or the bottom numbers here, if you have no high school education at all, you will earn an average a week of about $504. Just getting your high school diploma alone will increase your standard of living, going from $504 to $692. But if you go ahead and try to get or fulfill getting your bachelor's degree, your income, weekly income, significantly increases from having no high school at $504 to now $1,156. And as you see, the higher you go in education, getting your master's or your doctorate or a professional degree, you can make significantly more money with more education that you have. So if there's no other reason, education is giving you the knowledge, but it's also increasing money literally in your pocket. In California, we have 4 systems of education. Primarily, we have our California Community College System, or like JCs. I'll give you a little bit more information about each of these in a few minutes. Then we have our Cal State University systems. These are typically our overall state schools that a lot of people apply to. Then, of course, a lot of people have heard of the University of California. This would be like UCLA or UC Santa Barbara. This is another sort of level of education or level of colleges. And then finally, we have a number of private colleges and universities within the state as well, like Stanford or USC. Next slide, please. So in our California college system, we have 114 schools school-wide or statewide. Each of these are 2-year institutions. With these community colleges, you can earn technical or vocational degrees. You can earn certificates. Typically, most people earn their associate degrees, and then you transfer from a 2-year college onto a 4-year university. The great thing about community colleges, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this more later in the presentation, is that as a high school student, you can actually be dual enrolled in a community college as well as your high school, and you can be earning college credits toward the university that you decide to attend later on. So it's also a great way to boost your GPA and get college credit before you even finish high school. The requirements for community college are pretty basic. You don't have to have any specific classes that you fulfilled. You do have to be 18 years or older to enroll. But again, if you're doing dual enrollment through high school, you can be as young as 9th grade. And if you are under 18, they would like for you to have a high school diploma or at least a GED. And typical community colleges in California would include West LA, Santa Monica, Pierce College. All of those would be examples of California community colleges. Moving on to the next slide, we have California College Promise, which is in the state of California. If you are a high school student, you graduate with a high school diploma or the equivalent of a GED, the state of California waives your fees for 1 academic year, regardless of your income. And this is just one way that we want to make sure that every student has an opportunity to go to college, and that cost cannot be a barrier from keeping people out of getting educated. So this is a great thing that we have in California, and many other states also offer this as well. The California State University system, these are schools like Cal State Los Angeles, Cal State Northridge, Cal State Dominguez Hills. There are 23 of these schools around the state. These are all four-year institutions, so primarily you can go and get not only a bachelor's degree, you can also get a master's degree. Many of them also offer teaching credentials. Some of them even offer doctorate programs. The usual minimum requirements to get into these schools are a GPA of at least 2.0, but preferably higher. That you've completed A through G requirements, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. You don't have to take the SAT or the ACT for California state schools anymore. And again, they prefer that you have a GPA of at least 2.0 or higher. For the UCs, which are the next slide, there are 10 UCs statewide. 9 campuses are open to undergrads and transfers, and the 10th one is only available for graduate students. I believe that's UC San Francisco. These are all 4-year institutions. The difference between a UC and maybe a private school within California is that UCs really focus on research. These are considered research institutions. You can get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, as well as a doctorate degree, PhDs in some of them. The minimum requirements for the UCs, 3.0 is the minimum GPA, but of course that's just for eligibility. We'll talk more about what a GPA you would really need to shoot for. You need to have completed your A through G requirements. You don't need to take the SAT or the ACT for the UCs anymore, not at least until they review these things again in a couple of years. Right now, they're completely test blind, which is great. They do want you to have honors and awards. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Extracurricular activities, community service. And to apply to these schools, you need to complete writing 4 personal insight essays, and each of those essays are approximately 350 words each. And finally, the last group of schools within the state of California are private universities or independent colleges, and there are over 77 within the state of California. Most of these are 4-year programs. Some of them are 2 years. They receive private funding. They vary in size and prestige and cost. You can get your bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctor's degree. And again, some of these schools would include like USC or Stanford or Pepperdine University. The minimum GPA for most of these is 2.5, but again, that's just the low bar to get in. The expectation is that your GPA would be much higher. I'll talk about that a little bit more. You also have to have completed your A through G requirements. Some schools were going to require SAT and ACT, but most of the colleges now are still going either test optional or test blind. So this would be something you would need to check the requirements of the specific universities you were interested in applying for to find out what you would need to do to get into that school. Beware of what we call for-profit colleges. Not all of them are kind of sketchy, but some of them are. Many of these colleges are not accredited colleges or universities, which means if you take classes there, you cannot transfer those units to any other college or university. They usually also accrue a large amount of debt. And you do not necessarily get financial aid to cover these types of colleges. So as an example, without hurting anyone's political feelings, Trump University would be considered a for-profit college. That would be one that you would probably want to stay away from. They are a real estate program that focuses on kind of giving general education as well. But that would just be an example of a for-profit college that you probably would not want to pursue. All right. I'll go on. Next, let's talk about eligibility requirements. But before we do, are there any questions up to this point about just the overall process of how the layout of most college systems are within a given state?
So Terry, I wanted to ask a quick question. I noticed that you mentioned the different types of colleges like community college, and then there's the UC system, and then also the CSU system. I want to go back to the community college because I know that one could be a great benefit to a lot of our lower income, underrepresented communities. I was wondering what could be the great benefit of starting at like a community college and then pursuing your education as you move forward, or just going to a community college and either pursuing like a some type of trade or vocation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say there are two main benefits for going to a community college that I think everyone should consider. For one, it's significantly cheaper. A lot of people, when it's time to go to college, they may not have prepared financially for that activity. And so they find themselves graduating high school and they don't have enough money to go to the college of their choice. If you go to a community college for 2 years, you're basically slicing your college education in half in terms of costs. Yeah, in California, again, you get to go for 1 year for free, and we're going to talk more about costs later, but the second year is going to still be an affordable opportunity for you to do. So that's one reason it's significantly cheaper. The other reason is a lot of times high school students aren't really sure if they're ready to know what they really want to do. And so going to community college allows you another 2 years to sort of make that transition from high school to a 4-year university. You can take classes in a variety of subjects and figure out what you might want to major in. You can also see how you do academically going from high school to a junior college or a community college, which also then gives you a greater boost of confidence when you go to a 4-year university. So there are lots of advantages. And the main one, as I said, is you can even start taking community colleges in high school, earn that college credit that you can transfer, increase your GPA, and boost your confidence to show you that you are ready to go on to a 4-year university.
Great. And before we move forward,
Yeah.
I did want to ask you also about the benefit, like because I noticed when we were looking at the chart where it says no high school versus high school degree, and then it goes up exponentially. However, there are some vocations where in order to get proper training, like to become a plumber or to become an electrician, those are things that you can also get through the community college level.
Yes.
And those professions can actually yield pretty lucrative incomes if you're well trained and you pursue that career. So what would be your feedback on that?
Again, I think for people that aren't quite sure what you want to do, a trade is an excellent career path. And even if you are sure what you want to do, I know that my husband works for California Edison, and he was talking to me about the jobs of being a line a lineman, and the amount of money that you can make, upwards of $200,000 a year, just in regular work time and in overtime. And that's just from going through their trade school program. You don't have to have a college degree to do this job, but you can still earn and make a lot of money. So that would be an example of a great opportunity or great career to pursue without having to go and get a 4-year graduate degree or bachelor's degree.
Okay, and then there is one question that came in from the chat. It
Okay.
says, do many of the universities have internship programs? Because the question asker says this would be a great way to work and to go to college at the same time.
They don't necessarily have internship programs, but all of them have job opportunities on campus. And they translate into, for financial aid packets, what they call work study. And I'll actually talk a little bit about more of that when I get to that section on finances. Great question. Great question. All right, let's move on to eligibility requirements, because this is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of what you need to do or how you need to prepare to go to college. So off the top, I would say not every, most universities are going to require what you have A through G courses, and I'm going to go through what those A through G courses are. And if you're at a public high school, in most cases, you've already heard of what these are, but I'm just going to review them for the sake of people that may not know. Obviously, your GPA is very important. Exams like the SAT or the ACT in some cases are going to be essential for you to getting into certain colleges. You'll have to write essays. You will need letters of recommendation for private schools. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, you're definitely going to need to have extracurricular activities, and I'll give it a little bit more detail on that too. The other thing that's not on this list that might be a requirement for some schools, if you're pursuing degrees like in film or an art degree or photography, architecture, music. Some schools, if you're going for one of those types of degrees, might also require that you submit a portfolio of your work, because they want to see examples of what you can do or what you can produce. And so those will also be another important aspect when you are applying to certain colleges if you're going to pursue one of those majors. But let's start with the A through G requirements. A through G requirements was something that was developed a few years ago to kind of make sure that all students applying to college are on the same playing field, that they all have had the same type of education, they've all taken the same type of classes. And so this is what they've outlined are the A through G requirements. So A is for history or social science. Most universities want you to take at least 2 years of this. And the next slide I'll show you after we go through this will sort of outline when you would take these classes and how to sort of break them up. But for the most part, history, social science, 2 years. English, 4 years. All 4 years of high school, you're going to need to take an English class. Mathematics, 3 of the 4 years are required. Ideally, though, especially for private schools, they want to see that 4th year at a minimum, and particularly for certain degrees, like if you're going to pursue business or any type of STEM major, they want to see more than 3 years of math. For the laboratory science, this would be like biology and chemistry. It's definitely 2 years. Again, preferably 3 if you're going to a private school or applying to a private school. And that 3rd year might be, maybe your 1st year is biology, and then your 2nd year is chemistry. Your 3rd year might be AP Bio, or physics would be another example. Your language other than English, 2 years is requirement, but 3 years is really preferred, depending on what languages are offered at the high school that you attend. They would prefer that you take the same language for those number of years, as opposed to like 2 years of Spanish or 2 years of something else. And for visual and performing arts, they want to see 1 year. They want to make sure that you're well-rounded. So it's a full year of theater or music or an art class, a dance class. Those all qualify as visual and performing arts. And then they want to see at least 1 year of a college prep class. So this could suffice as being an AP class, a class that you took at a community college, but anything that really prepares you for college would be something that would fulfill that requirement. On this next slide, it sort of outlines for you how to spread out and take all of these classes. Usually your 9th grade year, you're not taking any history, but you hit that history requirement your 10th grade year when you're taking world history, and then your 11th grade year when you're taking U.S. history. Your 12th grade year, most high schools will require that you take U.S. government as well as economics. So that actually would give you that 3rd year of history, which puts you a little bit above sort of the norm of requirements. English, again, you're going to have to take English every year. Sorry if that's not your favorite subject, but all colleges need you to know how to write well, how to read, and they want to know that you can also, support your writing with evidence and clarity. Mathematics, there are 3 main required maths. You have to take Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. If you can get in pre-calculus or calculus or statistics on top of that, that's great. For the science, we talked about biology and chemistry and perhaps physics. Your language other than English, again, just taking 3 years, preferably if you can, of the same language, and then your visual and performing arts and your college prep. One note I want to make about math and language other than English. You can start these actually earlier than 9th grade. So for example, all 3 of my children started their algebra in 8th grade. So they will count what you take in middle school if it was one of these A through G requirements, but only for math and only for language arts. So if you took Spanish 1, let's just say in 8th grade or even 7th grade, they will count it toward your language requirement. And then if you continue on taking it in high school, that just makes it look even better. So just keep that in mind for math and for language arts. You can actually start these and they will count them if you take them in middle school. All right, let's talk a little bit about how your GPA is calculated from a college standpoint. And you'll see, as we've outlined here, colleges, primarily the bulk majority of them, will count your grades from the summer of 9th grade, between 9th and 10th grade. So if you take any classes in summer school between 9th and 10th grade, they're going to count that all the way through the summer between 11th and 12th grade, leading into your senior year. So the benefit of this is, let's say you didn't do so good 9th grade. It's okay. It's still going to be on your transcript. But in terms of how the colleges calculate your GPA on your college application, they don't put as much weight on your 9th grade year. And for your 12th grade year, technically, they only count the first semester of your 12th grade year, because by then you're already applying to colleges. And by your 2nd semester of 12th grade, you're already in the process of being admitted to colleges. So that GPA is crucial, that 10th and 11th grade year. Those are the 2 years where you really got to pull out all the stops and give your very best work, because those are the grades that are really going to impact you and impact your GPA moving forward and being considered for college. There's a lot of different ways that you can sort of boost your GPA. This slide basically outlines, you can just take regular classes. These are just your normal, like just taking biology. That would just be considered a regular class. If your school offers anything like an honors biology, then that would be a good class to consider. Oftentimes, there's not a significant amount of workload change from the regular class to the honors class. There might be a few more assignments, a little bit more rigor, but still certainly something that's manageable. Then another opportunity that high schools offer are called advanced placement classes, or AP classes as they're better known. And these classes are other opportunities that give you a chance to see what a college level class is really like. It really can boost your GPA up to 1 point per grade that you get, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But these AP classes are something that colleges want to see on your transcript. They want to be able to see that you're taking that extra step to prepare yourself for college. And not only are you taking that extra step, but that you're able to perform at that college level. Now, there's always a lot of debate with high school students that I have on whether they should take AP classes or not. And to me, after having done this for quite a while, I can definitely say there are pros and cons to taking AP classes. So I want to just take a few minutes to talk about that, because I know depending on where you are in your college career right now, you might be considering, should I take more or should I take less? And so I want to just go through this next slide and look at the pros and cons of taking AP classes. So first, from the pros, like I said, colleges expect to see, they want to see AP classes, honors classes, and any community college level classes that you have taken. They want to see that on your transcript. Why? They want to know that you're preparing yourself for college. You've already proven that you can compete at the college level, and it also raises your GPA to make you a more competitive applicant. Many schools, another great benefit of APs is that many schools give you college credit if you pass the AP exam with a 3, 4, or a 5. So for instance, UCLA, my daughter went into UCLA with quite a few college credits because she passed her AP exams. And those college credits count toward graduation. So she came in already with almost 2/4 of college already under her belt, just from taking those AP exams and passing with a score of 3 or better. So that is a great reason to take AP classes. I mentioned they boost your GPA. Oftentimes you hear people with a 4.2 or 4.3 or 4.4 GPA. That's because they're taking AP classes. Otherwise, the highest GPA you could get would be a 4.0 if you didn't take any AP or honors courses. The other advantage of AP class is that the level of discussion is at a much richer, higher level for learning. And this also reduces behavioral issues in the classroom. My kids always talked about what a great advantage it was being in an AP class versus a regular class, because the kids in the AP class are there because they really want to learn. And they're really giving their very best to try to get the best grade, to get the best score, but also to really learn and master the material. And that alone helped just the classroom be managed a lot better from that perspective. And then the final good reason for taking APs is that teachers have to receive additional training and certification to be able to teach an AP class. You can't just take a teacher that teaches biology and then just say, okay, this year you're teaching AP. No, they have to go get additional training in order to be able to do that, which means that you're also getting that richer, deeper level of learning and understanding from that particular teacher. And as many great reasons as there are to take AP classes, there's also some things that you consider and think about before signing up for every AP that's offered at your school. So for one, Ivy Leagues and private schools, they evaluate the context of options available to you. What does this mean? Well, it means if you're at a school like my kids were attending a high school where there were 25 AP classes offered. 25, that is a lot of AP classes. You might think, wow, the sky is the limit. But from a college perspective, if I know that a student went to a school with 25 APs and they only took, let's say, 3, that doesn't fare very well. That seems like the child or the student didn't take as much advantage as possible of the opportunities that were presented to them. On the same token, if another student who also only took 3 APs applied to that same university, but that university knows that that high school only offered 3 APs, they're saying, oh my gosh, that student took every opportunity to expand their education and prepare themselves for college. That high school only offered 3 APs. The student took all 3 APs. So I'm not saying that if you're at the school with 25 APs that you should try to take 25, but I'm saying a university, many of these private schools are thinking about the number of opportunities that you had to increase your level of getting into the school, to raise your GPA, and primarily to learn. So sometimes going to a school with more APs can actually work against you. Another con to the AP game is that some schools only recognize a 4 or a 5 score. So even though 3 is considered a passing grade, some schools like USC, as an example, they won't accept a 3. They want you to have only 4s mostly 5s on some of those AP in order to give you college credit. So they'll still be happy that you took the class and they see it on your transcript, and you may have even gotten a good grade in it. But in terms of accepting that as college credit at the university, might be minimized a little bit. The other thing is some schools don't count any college credit in terms of your AP scores, no matter how well you did. So for instance, a school like Dartmouth or Brown, you can take 10 AP classes and get 5s on every single one of your AP exams, and Dartmouth and Brown are going to accept 0 in terms of transferable credit. Again, they want to see it on your transcript. They want to know that you've taken these classes, but they're not going to translate that into college credit at their school, no matter what score you get on the AP exam. So make sure that you think about this when you're signing up for classes, and as you're looking at your college list, that you look on their website to find out what their policy is for accepting AP exam credit. Sometimes AP classes, instead of boosting your GPA, can actually weaken your GPA. As I mentioned, they are a higher level of learning. They're a higher rigor, academic rigor that's going to be required. And sometimes, you might take AP biology instead of biology. Well, you might have gotten an A in regular biology, but in AP biology, you may have gotten a B, which will still calculate to an A, but on your transcript, it still says B. So if you are used to getting straight A's or getting high B's, and you don't score as well as you think you might have with that AP class, that can actually weaken your GPA. I mentioned that a lot of these have a significant increase in workload. Oftentimes, these classes require a lot of summer prep assignments. So I remember when my kids were taking APs, there would be a lot of reading over the summer that they had to do for certain classes, a lot of written work that had to be prepared, so that when school started in August, that teacher could hit the ground running, delivering all of this material that needs to be completed or needs to be delivered before the AP exam, which is the other con of taking an AP class. Sometimes your teacher is not able to complete all of the amount of work that is required for you to be able to pass your AP exam, which means that you will then have to do a certain degree of independent learning on your own to make sure that you are well prepared, not only to take the exam, but to pass the exam. And then finally, another con to APs is that unless you have AP waivers, APs are costly. Each AP exam, not to take the class, but the AP exam, they run about $95 an exam. So if you're taking 6, 7, 8 APs over the course of high school, that could equate to almost $700, $800 that you will have to pay to take these exams. So again, unless you are on a free and reduced lunch program where those fees are waived, then you will be responsible for paying those fees before you're allowed to take the test. So those are some of the cons. I don't discourage students from taking AP classes. Again, every college expects them, but I highly recommend more leaning toward the community college route, doing the dual enrollment arena, because it's less expensive. You don't have to take an exam. You automatically get your college credit if you pass the test. And most of your schools will accept your community college requirement for college when you get there. In fact, for my daughter who's at Southern, she had a full semester of college credit because of the classes that she took at West LA College. And she was able to transfer all those classes and all that credit over to her college, which put her ahead of the game from most entering freshmen at that school. So again, that is what I highly recommend in terms of going AP or not AP. Let's look at some other things that make you admissible versus competitive. Oh, but before I do, I want to just touch on this real quick. Certain classes that fall under AG requirements or that you might be required to take in high school don't count towards your A through G GPA. Some of these classes include PE. Most high schools require that you take PE. Colleges don't count PE classes for your GPA. So even though you're getting an A, and we want you to keep getting an A, again, that's not going to be a class that's counted in your GPA. Health class is not counted. Wood shop, a lot of your electives are not counted. Service, like if you are a TA for a teacher, that doesn't count. And leadership doesn't count for your GPA, but it does count on your extracurricular activities. So we still encourage you to do that one. Okay, now let's talk about what makes you competitive versus admission. So looking at the GPA, these are just an overview of how you would calculate your GPA. So an A equates to 4 points, a B equates to 3 points, a C equates to 2 points, a D equates to 1 point, and of course a fail equates to 0. You don't get any GPA points if you fail a class. If you look at example number 1, the student took 6 classes. They received a total of 16 points if you calculate the letter grades that they received, but we're only going to divide that over 5 classes because we said PE does not count as part of your GPA. So if we take the grades that the student received, calculate all the points divided by the number of classes, example 1, the student would have a 3.2 GPA. And example number 2, you're seeing that the same classes, but we gave, instead of regular English, example 2, they took AP English. They got an A, so they got 5 points because the AP class boosts you up a whole grade point, a whole point. So you'll see for that AP, they got 5 points instead of 4 for that A. Geometry is still the same, but they took AP Bio and they got a D. If you get a D in an AP class, you don't get the boost in the points. So you see for regular bio, we got a D, 1 point. For the AP Bio D, it didn't boost to the 2. It still stays at 1 because a D is a barely passing grade. And then you see they also didn't count the PE. So in this scenario, in example 2, there's a total of 18 points, grade points, divided by the same number of classes, 5, because we're not counting PE. And in this case, you can see by just taking those 2 AP classes, really only 1 counting, it boosted their GPA from a 3.2 to a 3.6. Actually, they took 3 AP classes because they took AP World History. So that really makes a difference when you're looking at being under 3.5. That's always kind of the barrier for a lot of colleges. Are you under 3.5? Are you over 3.5? And the next big category is, are you over 4.0? In this case, example 1 or 2, example 2 would make this student a much more competitive college applicant because they are over now the 3.5 mark. Looking at entrance exams, I'm only going to just spend a few minutes talking about this slide because a lot of schools, as I said, are no longer even counting SATs or ACTs, but I just want to give you maybe just a few differences in that. So the difference between the SAT and the ACT, you see the length is about the same. They're both about 3 hours long. The main difference is that the ACT has math, English, and science, whereas the SAT just has math and English. It does not include science. So if you are, feel like you're probably a really strong science student, maybe a stronger STEM major, then going for the ACT might be a better route for you. But I always suggest students take, if you're required to for your university, I suggest that you take each test at least once to get a baseline to see which one you score better in. And then based on that, then continue to take and improve your score on the one that you feel more comfortable with and that you tended to do better on. The scoring is a little bit different for the SAT. It's on a scale of 1600, and on the ACT, it's on a score of 36. The cost is fairly comparable, about $60, $65 for both of these tests. And then, like I said, just to make sure that when you are applying for the colleges that you find out, are these tests required or are they test optional?
Perfect. And I wanted to jump in really quickly here too. One thing about the SAT is that You can start to take it in your sophomore year, and
Yes.
it is the precursor to many colleges and universities to get on the scholarship train. So they start to qualify you for merit-based scholarships, as well as academic scholarships, oftentimes based off of that first PSAT score that you take. So you might not feel like you're ready, but go ahead and take the exam, see how you do. It'll give you a marker and a example of what's next in terms of things you have to work on, but also it could give you the plug for money as well. So just wanted to add that little tidbit.
Thank you. And also, I just want to add something else you just reminded me of. Many high schools are now starting to offer the SAT at their home site in the spring. And research has shown that students that take the SAT in their home school tend to score higher than when they take it at a neighboring school or a school that they're not as familiar with. So I just strongly suggest to students, if your school is offering an SAT exam on that campus, I highly recommend that you take at least one of those sittings on your campus. And then again, if you want to increase your score even further, then you can take it at surrounding neighboring schools. But research has shown that you do tend to score higher because you're in a more comfortable environment. You usually know the proctors, you know the setting, you know most of the students, or if not all of the students in your senior class, and it just makes it for a much more familiar and comfortable environment for you to score even better. So thank you for that reminder, Dr. Fowles. All right, let's look at admissible versus competitive requirements. This is a big thing. Like I said before, as an example for the UC schools, the admissible, the bare minimum requirement is a 3.0. They want you to have at least a 3.0 before you can even consider applying. But the reality is that to make you a competitive candidate, you really need to be more in the 3.8 or higher range. Now, that doesn't mean that anyone under 3.8 is not going to get in. Plenty of people do. But to really be competitive and to set yourself up for a higher percentage of chance of getting in, then you would need to have 3.8 or higher. Same thing for admissible. They want you to have at a minimum 15 A through G courses. But ideally, to be competitive, you need to have probably 21 or more A through G requirements. So remember when I was talking about instead of just 3 years of math, maybe have 4. Instead of just 2 years of science, maybe have 3. These are the ways that you can increase the number of A through G courses that you take, and it makes you a much more competitive applicant. For the number of AP classes or honors classes or college level classes to be admissible, none are actually required. They say 0 to 5, but I have found in helping other students that really 6 to 8 is almost kind of more the general rule. And then anything more than 8 is just kind of gravy for you. So to be competitive, you need to have in that range, you know, at least 6 to 8 AP college level courses or honors level courses. For admissible, 3 A through G courses in 12th grade. This is a pretty easy requirement to manage because, again, one of those has to be English. One of them is usually going to be your US Gov and Econ class. And then oftentimes that third one is a history class or a social science class or perhaps a language class. But to be competitive, they want to see that your 12th grade, your senior year, that you are not just kicking back, taking basket weaving and PE and TAing and maybe, you know, just doing whatever. They want to see that you are maintaining as ever an academic rigor in your senior year of high school as you did in 10th and 11th grade. They want to make sure that you're not doing the work and then kicking back and just, you know, riding on your laurels now. They want to make sure that you're maintaining that momentum all the way to the finish line. And then finally, for your SAT scores, when SAT scores are required for the UCs, which they aren't anymore, but I kept this on here because typically, you know, a bar to shoot for with even a lot of private schools is somewhere in the 1200 mark. just to kind of be like at the bare minimum, but to really be competitive at a lot of these schools like SC and Stanford and some of these private schools, you need to be hitting that 400 range or higher. 400, 500, or I'm sorry, 1400, 1500. Whoa, 500, you wouldn't go anywhere. 1400, 1500, range for getting into a lot of these schools. Now, what is the difference between admissible and competitive? Like, why is this important? I'll take, for example, UCLA. UCLA last year had 150,000 applicants applying to that school. 150,000 applicants for only 4,500 spots. So statistically, you see, it is almost becoming impossible to get into some of these universities. But the difference in how these students are getting selected of those 4,500 who are, it's because they are leaning far into this competitive category. They have exceeded that GPA. They have exceeded those A3G courses. They've exceeded the number of AP classes. They've exceeded or maintained that level of rigor in their 12th grade year, their senior year of high school. So that is the difference in being admissible versus competitive. And this is the same mindset at any private school that you would apply to. You've really got to shoot for that higher edge if you really want to be considered a competitive candidate. So I leave that up there just because I think it's a really good visual of what the difference is between being admissible and competitive. In addition to having all of these requirements, all colleges want to see you having extracurricular activities. They want to know that you're not just smart because, let's face it, everybody applying to college is smart or you wouldn't be applying to college. So they want to see a well-rounded person. They want to see that you're hitting it hard academically, but you're also involved in your school. You're also involved in your community. You also have honors and awards in leadership. So we're just kind of walk through some of those categories that will help you prepare besides just on the academic side, what you need to have to be able to be competitive in college. So let's start first with honors and awards. All colleges want to know that you have gained some degree of notoriety in some arena where someone has recognized you for something that you have achieved or done, academically or otherwise. So this could be an essay that you've written where maybe you won a scholarship for, or an art contest that you won. It could be a sports or a recreation recognition, like maybe you were MVP of your sports team. Any kind of academic recognition, like being on the dean's list or the honor roll or a science fair that you participated in, or any type of exam scholarship. Dr. Fowles was just talking about. These are where a lot of scholarships can come in through just taking the PSAT and scoring a particular score on that. So any kind of award or honor that you have received is something that you will actually be recording on your college application. The UCs, they give you 20 spots to fill with extracurricular activities, including awards and honors. For the Common App, you have 5 spaces that they give you to put in awards. So that's always a good number to shoot for in terms of getting awards or some sort of recognition. The other thing that colleges want to see are involvement in clubs or community service. And let's go to the next slide. Looking at, are you involved in any clubs, organizations? What type of volunteering are you doing? Are you involved in any internships or employment? Also counts as being an extracurricular activity. What kind of artistic abilities do you have? All of these things are things that you would be including in the college application under the extracurricular section. And this is why it's so important. I just mentioned the UCs give you 20 spots. If you're only involved in a couple of things, hopefully you're not in your senior year only involved in a couple of things. Now is the time to start building what I call your high school resume, getting involved in things that you'll be able to actually put down on your college application of things that you're involved in. And there's a number of schools that also look for what we call pre-college programs. Like, what did you do during the summer? Or how are you spending your summer? Are you taking additional classes? Are you involved in a pre-college program, which is a college program on a college campus of some sort? And there are many that schools offer. You can Google any school that you are interested in going to and find out what kind of summer programs they offer. Some of these are paying, like you have to pay for them, but many of them are free. You just have to apply. But this is very important that you have a lot of activities, because this also tells colleges what you're really passionate about. It tells them something about who you are as a person. If you're involved in fencing or basketball or football, that tells them, hey, you've got a level of discipline and perseverance because you're an athlete. If you're involved in music or the yearbook, that also tells them, okay, this kid's got a little bit of an artistic or a creative slant to them. That's important. They want to have that type of diversity on their campus. So not only is it important for you to be involved in these activities for your own benefit, but it tells the colleges something about who you are as a person. The other thing they look for is leadership. So it's not just enough to be involved in some of these activities, but they want to see the level of involvement. Like, have you been in, let's just say, choir for 3 years, or have you been in your sport for 3 years, but you're just a member? You haven't really developed into maybe a leadership role in that organization. That's something that they really look for. So let's say if you're part of a BSU or MECHA, they want to know, did you start as a member and then maybe the next year you were vice president? Or better yet, let's say you started a club. So now you're a founder of a club and you're president of that club. Oh my gosh, that really shows them that you're taking initiative to develop your leadership skills, and you're also making a difference on your campus. So they want to see the length of involvement that you are in some of these activities and the progression of leadership that you are taking or that is happening with the degree of involvement that you have. So any kind of leadership role, even if it's not a formal role, like let's say you're on a sports and athletic team and there is a team captain and you're not the team captain, but let's say you help lead the conditioning exercises. Well, you're the conditioning exercise leader. Okay. It doesn't have to be a formal title, but a formal thing or an actual thing that you do to help support that team and that supplies or operates as a leadership role. And of course, all work experience shows leadership because you're a young person, you're going out looking for a job, working a job, coming out to work on time, doing what's required of you on the job, receiving your paycheck. Those are all things that show responsibility and commitment and perseverance to a college admission advisor. And so this is work experience is a great way to also show leadership on a college application. The thing that I recommend you doing after you're getting involved in all these things is that you need to create a resume. And this resume, this is just an example of what a resume might look like. It's a way for you to chronicle and keep track of all of these activities that you're involved in, keep track of the dates, because that's going to be something that you're going to have to remember on your college applications. They want to know the dates that you participated, the length of time. If you have it all in a resume, you can just refer to this. The resume is also a really great tool when you are applying for scholarships. Oftentimes when my kids are applying for scholarships, it'll ask, what kind of activities are you involved in? What kind of community service have you done? And it's always a great thing to just write, see attached resume. And then you attach this very professional looking document with that application. It's a hit every single time. And many scholarship committees have commented to my kids like, wow, your resume was so impressive, not just because of the things that you've done, but the fact that you even had a resume to be able to send to us and include. So this is a great thing that you'll need to have. You'll also need to have a resume when you're applying to those jobs I talked about. Oftentimes a resume is your entry into the door when you're applying for jobs, and when you go in for the actual interview, they're going to want to be able to see you involved in. What kind of experience do you have for this job? What type of transferable skills do you have that are going to make you a good fit for this position that I have? So having the resume will be able to show an employer that. And finally, the other benefit of having a resume, like an actual piece of paper, is when you are going in high school and you have to ask some of your teachers for letters of recommendation to actually get into some of the colleges that you're applying for. Teachers will always want to know, well, tell me something about yourself beyond what I know about you in the classroom. The resume is a great way for them to see other things that you're involved in outside of the class, things that they may not have even know you were a participant in. So this is a great way to not only impress your teacher, but help your teacher to really write a unique and a detailed and a personal letter about you that will position you well against other candidates who are applying for that same college. So have the resume, and then I recommend that you put the resume and keep all of your documents in a binder, which I happen to keep for all of my kids. It's a binder of all of their records. Their resume is included in here, but also all their test scores, their report cards, little brochures about the activities that they've been involved in so that we can write about those things when they are actually applying to college. But keeping everything in one binder in one place will really help you stay organized, and it'll make applying to college when you're actually filling out those applications so much easier. And then one more slide we'll talk about before we get to money is just some dates that you'll want to keep in mind when you're thinking about applying to college. So these are pretty much, again, standard dates for schools in California. For the UC application, the application always opens on August 1st. That means you can actually log in and start putting in information on August 1st. The applications aren't going to be due until November 30th. So you've got plenty of time to fill them out, but they like to have you open in August so that you take the time to actually, fill them out. Don't wait, please, till November 29th to start filling out that application. You'll never be able to do it. It's too much information. And this is the same for any college application. Give yourself as much leeway as possible as soon as the application opens. Same thing with the Common App. It opens August 1st. Many of your deadlines for college aren't going to be until November or December or even January, February, depending on the schools that you're applying for. But start that application early because there's a lot of information that they want in there. You have to actually physically input all your grades, all your classes, all of your extracurricular activities, personal data. It takes time. Please give yourself the amount of time to do that. The CSU application opens on October 1st, and you can submit it as early as October 1st, but all the way up until November 30th is when that one is due. FAFSA, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, is when you file for financial aid. That is always March 2nd for the state of California, but it might vary depending on what state you are from in terms of when it's due, but you can file it as early as October. And the sooner you file it, the more quickly you'll be made aware of how much you can qualify for financial aid. And this also, the sooner you apply for or fill out this form, colleges will help you determine if you qualify for any financial aid directly from their school. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Oh, here's a great question. What about cover letters to go along with your resume and applications? You don't need cover letters for your college applications, but for jobs, absolutely. For internships, absolutely. For scholarships, you don't need a cover letter. You just need to fill out the scholarship application. But that's a great question. Okay, let's stop. Are there any other questions before we get to money? Because I know that's often one a lot of people have a lot of angst about is how much is all this going to cost? But I want to just make sure, are there any questions about eligibility requirements before we get to money?
I'm not seeing any other additional questions in our chats right now. But one thing I do want to share, right, is the plus factor, right? So I think about the fact that when students apply to college, it's one of the ways that we can find a grounding spot for folks, right? Like, hey, here's a baseline of who we think qualifies and represents our institution, right? So if everyone has a similar baseline, your application is really about what gives you that plus factor, right? What are the things that make you unique outside of the grades, outside of some of those things that everyone has, right? So I went to USC, and everybody at USC has great grades, right? So if everyone has great grades, what is that extra thing that's going to make that person unique and special and different? So I think that that's something that is important to really think about. That's really key in terms of the resume that you just shared.
And that is also a great point. I want to just kind of piggyback on that. I call it riding in on a horse. And when I do college coaching with high school students, this is what I tell them. What is your horse? Because everybody's coming in on a horse and everyone's trying to get past that finish line. But your horse has to be something that is slightly more unique, slightly different, that is going to make a university say, oh my gosh, I not only want that person, but I need that person on my college campus. So I'm going to give you the example of my daughter, Trinity. She's currently at UCLA. I mentioned a sophomore. She's majoring in public affairs, and she ideally would like to become a lawyer. The horse that she rode in on was social justice. And Trinity has a track record for advocating for others. And some of the things that she has done in her high school career, she was president, student body president during the pandemic, which, oh my gosh, was in and of itself social justice for sure, because she had to advocate for students to make sure they had the right kind of equipment in their home, to make sure that their mental health was being monitored. She was doing all these things, checking in with teachers, checking in with administrators, because she's the one who's hearing from students about some of the needs that are out there in this virtual world. And so that's part of what she did. She also went on a missions trip to Mexico City during her 10th grade year, and she worked with young girls who had been rescued from human sex trafficking. She stayed in a safe house with these girls. I went with her actually. And she did a number of things to try to advocate for them. She was teaching them different skills, life skills, fluency skills, cooking skills. She even taught them how to do a volleyball clinic because she was a volleyball player at her school. All of these kinds of things. Her resume is packed full of things that lead to social justice. She was on the mayor's youth council and here in the city of Los Angeles working on the homeless cohort. So she's done a lot of things around this area. And so she had pretty well established track record on her horse that, hey, not only do I want to advocate for people that I feel are marginalized in our community or who are underserved or overlooked in some way, but I want to pursue that as a career. And I have proof that I've already done those things and that I'm going to continue to do those things. Of course, she had the GPA over 4.0. Of course, she was involved, had lots of leadership roles and honors and awards and all that. But it was her unique horse that helped get her into UCLA. And it's helped earn her a substantial amount of scholarships along the way to pay for her education. This summer, she's going to spend 5 weeks in Spain, in Barcelona, Granada, Madrid, studying Spanish. She wants to become completely bilingual in Spanish so that she can help even more people in her career. And she'll also be serving in the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office this summer, doing an internship in preparation again for when she applies to law school. So what is your horse? That's the question you need to think about. What's the horse you're going to ride in on college? And how is that horse going to be different or faster than some of the other students who are applying alongside you for those same few spots? One final thing about this slide before we leave it. I mentioned the process for starting to apply for college usually begins in August. It runs through usually the end of the year, January, February. Some schools take you even as late as March in terms of applying. But then you start hearing if you've been accepted from those colleges as early as December. sometimes January, February, but really March and April are like the main months where you will start getting college acceptance letters or college rejection letters, unfortunately. And so that kind of gives you an idea. You know where you're going. By May 1st, every college student or every person that wants to go to college, you have to commit to a college by May 1st. So if you've been accepted at a college, if you don't commit by May 1st, you lose your spot. So that's very important. You can only commit to one college. So that's why they try to have everybody have all of their acceptances by May 1st so that you can make that decision. Okay, let's talk about money. This is a tough topic because it's oftentimes the barrier that keeps people from going to college, unfortunately. And so I really try to make sure I give people a realistic picture of some of the costs so that you can start planning and preparing for it sooner rather than later. And where we start is with senior year in high school, because before you can even apply to college, you've got to get through that senior year in high school. And for us, this was a huge aha moment. I had 3 kids, I mentioned. And when my first kid went through high school, I was blown away at the amount of money that we spent for high school senior year. And then for second year, I chronicled a little bit of that money, but because it was a COVID year, I didn't think it would be as verifiable or valid because, again, how many COVID years are we going to have? Hopefully never anymore. But so then I started tracking the expenses for my third child just to give a cost comparison. So I'm going to run through some of these expenses. Some of these are going to be common no matter who you are, where you are, what state you live in. Others are going to be specific just to the school that my kids went to, but I'm including them anyway just so that you'll have an idea of, again, what to prepare for. And you might have other costs that are like these, but that are slightly different. So let's start with SAT, ACT scores. Both of my kids took them. For my son, it was around $163. My daughter, it was around $140. AP exams, remember I said they're about $92, $95 a piece. My daughter, even though she took AP classes, she did not take any AP exams. By law, you're not required to take the AP exam. I don't like to encourage that. High schools would probably not like me to say that at all, but it's the truth. So I let people know, yes, you should take AP classes. I do encourage you to take the AP exam, but my daughter did not feel prepared enough from her teachers to take the exam and pass the exam, so she chose not to. So there was no fee for us to do that. College tours, huge difference here. Don't let this fee scare you. My son, primarily all of his colleges he applied to, 8, were all in California. So they were all schools that we could drive to, or he had visited frequently on a number of field trips that he had taken throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. So we didn't need to do a lot of on-site visits. My daughter did not want to go to UCLA. She didn't want to go to school in California. She wanted to go to a historically Black college or university, which all of them are out of state. So we had to travel to go look at those schools. And particularly since this was the first child going away to school, me and my husband both wanted to be a part of that journey so that we would feel comfortable in this process of her going away to school as well. So we took 3 trips and 3 people traveling. It was around $4,500 in total. And this included hotel costs, airplane costs, food costs, renting a car when you're in that city, and other expenses that we incurred while we were there. You don't have to spend $4,500 to do college tours. You can probably do this a little bit cheaper. And, you know, in hindsight, I wouldn't have necessarily visited every school that we did, but maybe limited to her top 3 that I felt like she wanted to see. But for instance, 3 of the schools were in the same city in New Orleans. So it would just made sense for us to go to New Orleans and look at all 3 of those schools. And she ended up choosing one of those schools to go to. So, you know, it was a really good trip. College application fees. Every time you apply to a college, it is not free unless you have free and reduced waivers that you can apply to this. So as an example, to apply to the UCs, every UC is $70. To apply to the Cal States, every Cal State is $70. To apply to a school like USC, $85. You start adding that up, you go to, you apply to 5, 6, 7, 8 schools, you're going to easily hit $500 pretty quickly. So that is those college application fees that adds up pretty quick. The CSS profile is also, this is something when you apply to private schools only, in addition to FAFSA, they want you to apply for CS profile, which is a deeper dive into your financial status and your financial affairs, and that costs $25. College registration fees, once you SIR, once you commit to going to a school, you have to pay a deposit, kind of guaranteeing or holding your spot. Sometimes schools also require that you pay a housing deposit if you're going to live on campus at the same time. So, for example, my son who went to UCLA, his registration fees were about $280. For my daughter, it was about $300. So that was pretty comparable, but that was a fee that we had to pay sometime in May. School events, you can see my kids were pretty comparable in expenses. Some of the bigger expenses for my son went away from my daughter, which I was so thankful. Like the Catalina trip was a senior trip that the seniors took. Calculus camp was only if you were in calculus. Those were fees that my daughter didn't incur because it was coming off of COVID. They didn't offer calculus camp or the senior field trip that year. The big difference in this, grad night. Oh, everybody wants to go to grad night. My son had to pay $165. It increased in cost by the time my daughter rolled around to $190. Prom, $310 for my son to go to prom. This includes your ticket, renting the tux, your transportation, your food or after party that they go to. For my daughter, her cost was almost doubled because she invited a guest who wasn't from the school, and we felt a certain degree of obligation to pay for that date's ticket to the prom because he was also a senior and he also had to pay for his own prom and he also had to rent his own tux. So to be color coordinated with my daughter, he had to get a whole different tux and everything. So we helped incur some of those expenses for him as my daughter's date. He was a very good family friend and we just felt, an obligation to do that. Graduation fees. Every school does this a little bit different. At our school, they just collected one fee at the beginning of the school year that was going to cover the cost of things like renting the equipment for graduation, the yearbook, your cap and gown. There's a whole bunch of fees that were combined in there. As you can see, it was pretty comparable for both kids. Other fees, aside from whatever things your school incurs. Pictures, if you want to send out announcements to your family and friends and let them know that you graduated, there's a cost for that. I even had mine done at Costco. I didn't even get them through the school photographer or the school outlet photographer that we usually partner with, but even still getting them through Costco's and mailing them out and getting postage, it's about $150. Other programs and fees. My son was involved in a program called Youth in Government. That was a program that we had to pay for. He also was invited to be a part of a cotillion for another family friend of ours, and that was another fee that we had to pay. Now, you may not have youth in government or cotillion, but if your child is involved in any kind of club sport, I'm willing to bet that you're paying almost $2,000 or somewhere in that range, maybe even more, for your child to be involved in a club. And you might think, well, they've always been involved in club. Yeah, but think of it that now that club fee is incorporated into the other fees that you're having to pay for senior year. So you need to add that in, and that increases your costs. Most kids turn 18 during their senior year, and you might want to have some sort of party or celebration. For my son, he was pretty cheap. He just wanted to go to dinner. So we were able to go to dinner, believe it or not, in 2018 for $55. Can't do that now for a family 5. And for my daughter, I didn't include her fee in her total, but she turned 18 in October. So that's why I took it out of there. It technically didn't fall within her senior year, but hers was so much more because we had to fly her home from Southern to have her 18th birthday. So that's why her costs went up so much. And then finally, the graduation celebration. My son's was about $350. That's with having a great big huge party going in with 11 other families, and who a lot of our friends and families had kids who were also in graduating the same year as my son. And so we all piled our money together and gave a big party, and it ended up costing each family about $350. For my daughter, we did a home backyard party, and we shared this backyard party with her older brother, who is child number 1, because he was graduating from college the same year she was graduating from high school. So we did one big party in the backyard. The party was about $1,000. So I only charged her, or put in here for her fee, $500 for her graduation celebration, in all fairness, since the other half went to her brother. But this is just a ballpark estimate. $5,399 for my son, $7,556 for my daughter. Now, again, some of these costs can be reduced, but I would say at a minimum, you're going to need around $3,500 for senior year, at a minimum. And that's really like cutting out a lot of the college tours. Maybe they're not involved in these club programs or some of these other activities that actually you have to pay for your kid to be involved in. But some of these other fees, like the college tours, or the application fees, those are kind of fixed costs that you just can't get around unless you can have free and reduced waivers that you can apply to college applications. And in many cases, you will be able to use these. But unfortunately, we did not qualify for those, so we were not. So that's just getting out of senior year, those expenses. Let's move on and look at other expenses that you will have to pay once you get into college. This next slide sort of talks about what is the cost of attendance. So for the most part, room and board, this is if you were going to live on campus or even live off campus, you got to have a place to stay. You got to have rent or housing costs covered. Health insurance is another cost that just about every single college is going to require that you have. They want you to have health insurance because guess what? If something happens on their college campus, they don't want to be liable for, your health of that, or something happens to you. They want you to be able to be covered emotionally, physically, all of that well-being. So in many colleges, if you have your own health insurance, like at UCLA, if you have your own health insurance, they allow you to waive their health insurance, meaning you don't have to pay. So that saves us about over $2,000 a year that we don't have to pay as part of our tuition, because we can waive the health insurance costs because we have our own private health insurance. But at a school like Southern, they require you to still have their health insurance, even if you have your own personal health insurance. So you can't waive it. They already build it into the tuition, and there's no way that you can pull it out. So that's something that you should look at again in the colleges that you apply to. But health insurance is a requirement. Obviously, your tuition is part of the attendance costs, and we'll look specifically at some of those fees in a few minutes. Personal expenses, this is like your dorm supplies, your clothes that you're going to need to have, your food. Usually your room and board, your dorm will cover your meals. But let's say if you're commuting back and forth from home and you want to eat on campus, or you need to just eat in general, personal expenses are going to be included in that. Transportation. I didn't need to have a lot of expense for transportation for any of my kids because they lived on campus, but this would be like Uber or bus. My daughter Trinity is huge on those Bird bikes. So yeah, she needs money for those Bird bikes to get around campus, or also now to get back and forth to her job. And then finally, books and supplies is another expense that you have to have. You got to be able to put things in your dorm that the school doesn't provide, but also you need to have books. We've been able to save good money on books because my kids are smart and they know mommy likes to save money. So they've been able to find a lot of their books in PDF form online, that they didn't actually have to purchase them. You can also rent books on Amazon at a substantially cheaper price than if you actually purchase the books. And they pretty much will have a lot of the books that your standard classes are using. You can rent them for a nominal fee. They usually allow you to rent them for the duration of the quarter or the duration of the semester, and then you turn them back in. So, it's just a cheaper route to go to be able to save money on books. I see a question here. Are basic education opportunity grants still available? These are funds that do not have to be repaid. Yes, we're going to be getting into funding in a few minutes. So I'm going to hold that question just for a minute. But yeah, this is the general cost of attendance when we talk about what does it cost to go to a particular school. These are some of the things that you have to think about. Let's look specifically now at just the differences in cost between the kinds of schools that we talked about. So for community college, your cost of attendance is somewhere around $5,000 to $12,500, again, depending on the school that you go to. The tuition is, most of the community colleges that I talked about is about $1,246. That's on the low end. That's just for tuition. It doesn't include some of those other things that I just went over in the slide prior that incorporate that whole cost of attendance, but you can see it's significantly less. For the Cal States, it's somewhere, cost of attendance, and this is on a year basis, by the way, $23,000 to $29,000, and tuition is somewhere about $5,042. And that is, again, a year. It's about $5,000, almost $6,000 a year to go to a Cal State, but then you factor in some of those other costs, it puts you in that range of 23 to 29. The University of California, these prices have gone up. The annual cost of attendance is now somewhere in $41,000. Used to be $30,000 when my first child started, and it's just increased in costs over the years. And I can say post-pandemic, a lot of schools have increased in price primarily because they lost so much money during the pandemic, primarily in housing, when students moved out of the dorms and went back home to be in quarantine. A lot of schools lost a lot of money, and for schools like a UCLA or some of the UCs, housing is their bread and butter. This is where they make a great deal of their funding. And so for tuition now is $13,000 to go to UCLA a year, but housing is almost $18,000. So this is where we now see the increase in housing has really now taken over. Housing is more expensive than the tuition at many of your UCs. And that is definitely something that came as a result or came post-pandemic that I personally don't like, but something I like to let people know about so that you'll be aware. And then private schools. Your cost of attendance is going to be anywhere from $42,000 to $90,000. And your tuition, again, $30,000 a year to $75,000, depending on where you go. I pulled a couple of schools just to give you ballpark. If you were to go to Stanford, let's just say, which is in Northern California, their tuition is somewhere around $61,000 a year. Their cost of attendance is $87,000 a year. USC, a little comparable, $67,000 for tuition. Cost of attendance is at about $90,000 a year. So they're definitely on the upper end of that. And then LMU, Loyola Marymount University, their tuition is somewhere around $58,000. So they're a little bit less in tuition. And their overall cost of attendance is somewhere around $84,000. So just a comparison of a few private schools to let you see why those numbers can range so significantly depending on where you go. Okay, let's look at different sources of aid. Like, how am I supposed to pay for college? Where am I supposed to get all this money from? Well, there's four main primary sources of aid where money can come from. One is from the federal government. You can also get money from the state, and this is not just the state of California, but any state that you live in. You can also get money specifically from the colleges that you attend, and you can get money from private funds or private donors. And how that aid sort of looks like, you can get scholarships, which is free money that's based on merit or talent, or sometimes based on need. These scholarships can come from the college themselves or from private funds. Work study is something that is offered to you. This is where you can earn money directly on your college campus by having a job, but this is part of the financial aid packet that they offer you. And this is money that is offered to you through the federal or state. And again, it's a way for you to help pay for college, but it's guaranteed money and you have the opportunity to work a job on your campus. Grants, this is free money that is based on need. A lot of this grant money can come from the state of California. There's a number of different grants that you can qualify for. It's based on your GPA. It's based on your income. And in some cases, it's also, it's primarily based on income and on your grades. And then, of course, loans. This is where you can also get money, but loans have to be repaid. Oftentimes, they're repaid at a fairly high percentage rate. I try to stay away from recommending loans if at all possible. I know sometimes this is the only way that you might be able to go to college, but to the degree that you can graduate from college debt-free, just sets you up that much better to be able to move into your career without having that burden or responsibility of paying back loans. But many people do. This is how many people go through college. And if it weren't for loans, they wouldn't be able to go to college. So I don't want to completely discourage you, but I would try to monopolize or take advantage of these other three sources of aid and funding, if at all possible, when you can. There is so much money and scholarships out there, I gotta say. And I think it's a very underutilized avenue for pursuing funds. You can Google, just about anything and find a scholarship for it. So like, let's say you play the ukulele. You could Google scholarships for kids who play the ukulele and you'll find one. I found scholarships for people who are vegans. I found scholarships for people who are left-handed. I found scholarships for kids who are of a particular ethnic background or religious background. I mean, just about anything. There are scholarships out there, and there are many times that nobody applies to these scholarships. So it's just basically like leaving money on the table. I can't tell you how many scholarships my kids have applied for and received. In part, they were deserving, yes, and they did qualify, yes, but there's another part. They got the money because there weren't enough applicants for the scholarship. And that's a very sad thing to have to say, but it's the truth. So apply. The ratio will eventually net itself out. I would say for every 10 scholarships that you apply for, you'll probably get maybe 5. You might get about 50% of them. But the more you apply for, the more you can get. And I can say for all 3 of my kids, without giving you specific figures, we have paid in each of our cases at least half of their tuition, at least half of their college expense, strictly and totally from scholarships. Scholarships strictly and totally for merit-based awards. Okay, so the money is out there. You just have to go after it, and you can apply for scholarships even if you're getting financial aid, even if you qualify for federal or state aid. You can still apply to scholarships. And speaking of scholarships, as an example, the Sigmas, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated is offering scholarships right now. This is still the application period for high school boys who are seniors, graduating seniors. You can apply for the scholarship. You can we'll provide that information for you before the end of this session so that you can qualify for one of those scholarships. But fraternities and sororities are a great avenue for looking for scholarships, as well as, banks, businesses. There's so many different opportunities. Find the place of employment where your parents work is also a great time. You might be able to find a scholarship through their job. There are many, many, many opportunities. Just try to pursue some of them. Here comes the thing right now. This is not only can we advertise for scholarships for the Sigmas, but also they're doing a fundraiser so that they can earn even more money to give away even more money to high school seniors who are in need and need that money to be able to prepare for college. So definitely pursue scholarships. I cannot emphasize that enough. How do you apply for financial aid? Well, there's a form, a federal form, if we can go to the next slide, called the FAFSA. And this is a form you can, the website is up there for you to click onto that. And it explains all about how to apply for FAFSA. Everyone that goes to college has to apply for this. A college will not even consider giving you any financial aid at all if you do not file this form. If you are an undocumented student, you can apply for DACA, which is a similar federal form that also tries to provide and support students in this way by giving financial support. This document for FAFSA opens up, as I said, October 1st. It's usually due March 2nd, but the sooner you can file it and get it in, the better. It is going to ask for income tax information from your parents from your previous year. So, for instance, if I'm applying to college this year for the fall of 2023, I'm going to need to supply my parents' income tax information from 2022. So from the previous year, not from the current year, but from the previous year. And it's based on that income tax return that they determine if you qualify or not. You can qualify for more if you have more than one kid in college. So for me, as an example, I mentioned I have 3 children. I have 8 consecutive years of paying college tuition. 4 of those years, I have 2 kids in college at the same time. So those are the kinds of things that are going to be included in this application that can help you qualify for a little bit more financial aid when you are filling out this form. One caveat I want to mention, especially to young men. When you apply for financial aid, when you fill out this form, you are also going to have to register for selective service. What is selective service? This is a voluntary program that says that if for some reason we have some sort of catastrophic war and we have tapped into every resource that we have in terms of people who are already signed up to be in the military through specifically the U.S. Army, if for some reason we've already utilized and all of that manpower that's there, then we are going to pull you, we're going to draft you into participate in the Army. Now, they only do this for boys. They don't require this for girls. But it is a requirement for you to be eligible to receive financial aid. And I just like to let people know that because it usually comes as a shock when you're filling out the form. And if you check no, then you automatically are not going to be eligible to receive financial aid. And from the government standpoint, their perspective is if you're not willing, in the event that we need to fight for our country, then why should we give you money for financial aid? It's been a long, hotly debated topic for many, many years. I've been involved in a lot of these discussions. I'm not in favor of this, but nevertheless, until the form changes, this is how it is. Statistically, the chances of you actually having to be drafted are slim to none because we have such a robust volunteer a group of people who are already committed to serving in the military. But again, it's just something I like to let people know that usually comes as a surprise when they're filling out this form. And again, just to reiterate, the deadline for this is March 2nd. And not only do you have to fill out this form as a high school or graduating senior going into college, but you have to fill out this form. You have to renew the form every single year that you're in college. So it's not a one-time fill out the form and I'm done with it. It's every year that you're in college because every year you have to prove if you're eligible for financial aid or not. So the benefit of this is, let's say your parents have a year like during COVID where maybe they lost their job, or maybe their income significantly shrinked. And so as a result, you might qualify for more financial aid because of that. So in a way, it does work to your advantage to be able to make sure that they're always getting the latest and greatest information about whether you're eligible or not for financial aid. We go to this next slide. It just is a reiteration that March 2nd is the deadline. And a reminder that, again, this is a form that you have to fill out and complete every year. What makes it nice is that when you have to go and fill it out in subsequent years, you can just copy and transfer your data over to the form again, so you don't have to fill out the whole thing again. It makes it very, very simple. So that is pretty much all that I have in terms of letting you know if you are college bound or not. Hopefully this was very informative for you, that you learned a lot, that you can better prepare for this process as you go along this journey, which I encourage everybody to do. But before we go, we'll take a few more questions. Kent Haywood, if I did not get into my dream school my freshman year, should I give up? No, you should not give up. I say go ahead and SIR or make a statement of intent to register at maybe your second choice school. Do really well in your grades, and then you can look to transfer. Especially, I know lots of students who've transferred from Cal State schools to the UC schools, and students who've transferred from one UC school to another UC school. So that is always an option. Don't lose faith. Just keep doing very well in school. Don't give up.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry. This information has been, so important and so, fulfilling, I feel, because it's definitely helping us to get a better scope on what it takes to identify whether or not I am a college-bound student. So when we ask that question, are you a college-bound student? I'd like to answer it. I say, yes, everyone can be a college-bound student. You just showed many examples of, the pathways that we can use to either get from, either starting off at the community college level and then advancing up, or, if your resources are in order and if you have the wherewithal or the money, you can go to private institutions and do very well. We had a question that came up. It says early action or early decision.
Okay.
Define, what are the differences between the two?
Very good question, and definitely something that comes up a lot. So there's actually like 3 ways that you can apply to college. One is called regular decision, which is what most schools will offer. This is like UC's as an example. Their deadline is November 30th, and that's when you have to apply by in order to be eligible for that school. Some schools like LMU offer an option called early action. And this means that their regular decision, their regular applications, if you're just applying through the regular decision process, is due sometime in early January. But if you want to apply early action, then you can apply by November 1st instead of the January date. And the advantage of this is that if you apply earlier, this means you have all your ducks in a row. You've already got your application done, all your essays, you are ready to go. This means when you apply in November 1st, as opposed to January, you are being considered in among a smaller group of students who are applying, because most of the students are going to be applying in January, right? So let's just say for practical purposes that normally 100 students apply in January, but maybe only 50 students apply by November. So you're being considered in a smaller pool of applicants, which increases your chances of getting into that school. That's called early action. Now, going early action means if you get in, you're not obligated to go there, but it just kind of lets you know earlier, okay, I've already gotten into one school. This is before, you would have found out in March if you applied in January. And it also kind of boosts your confidence to keep applying for other schools. So that's an advantage, and that's what it means to go early action. Early decision, some schools offer the early decision means kind of the same thing. You're going to be applying by November 1st, and most early decisions are either November 1st or December 1st, but let's just stick with the November 1st deadline. Early decision is I'm going to apply by November 1st, and I'm going to be considered in a smaller group of students. But if I get in, if they accept me, early decision means I'm obligated to go to that school. And early decision, why you're obligated is because you've made a commitment. Hey, if you guys look at my application early and accept me, I will for sure go there. And so then they take that spot off of the plate, which means if you change your mind, well, now you've taken a spot away from somebody else. So I don't recommend that you do early decision with multiple schools. In fact, that's kind of unethical, because if you get accepted in these schools, you're obligated to go to the school that accepts you. And, there's been a few cases where I know students who did early decision and then they changed their mind and didn't really want to go there, or for whatever reason couldn't afford it. And it worked out okay. But ethically, this is not something that you want to do. So I would say if you really want to get into school and it's your number one choice, no matter how much it costs, no matter anything that you're going to have to go through to get there, and you go early decision and you get in, then that's a great thing. The other thing, and this is where you'll need to look at the difference with a lot of these schools as well too. Going back to the example of LMU, if you go early application, early decision, and you don't get in that November group, let's just say, they still consider you in the January group with all the other students. It doesn't mean you're completely now out of chances of going to that school. But early decisions, some schools will say, yeah, we'll put you back in the larger pool. We didn't accept you now, but we'll put you in the larger pool. Some schools don't put you back in the larger pool, that their policy is with early decision that was kind of like your one shot to get into the school. So you're also kind of, you're not taking, I don't think, a greater risk, because again, you're being considered or compared with a smaller group of students. But if you really, really want to go to a school, if it's like one of your top 3 and you have the option of doing early action, I say go for it if you're prepared and ready. But early decision, I would be very, very careful which school or schools you choose to go that route with.
Very good. Thank you so much. So as we start to wrap up here, I know that we had a lot of great questions in the chat, and that's going to be beneficial for those who will be watching later. And then also, is there some contact information that you would like to provide, or?
Sure. I will certainly provide my email address if someone would like to contact me personally and ask me a specific question. I'm always available for that. It is Haywood, HAYWOOD 22003 at yahoo.com.
Very good.
Haywood 22003 at yahoo.com. And yes, if you have questions, please feel free to email me.
Great. We're really excited to have this information as a part of our ongoing educational suite and educational platform that we're providing here at Phi Beta Sigma alumni chapter. We're the one chapter that's not only named after our fraternity. We're here in the Los Angeles area, but if you're outside of the LA area, feel free to look at that scan code below. You can feel free to donate to support our upcoming William Nickerson Jr. Scholarship Luncheon that's coming on July the 8th. And we're really excited about that, where Terri spoke to the fact that we'll be providing scholarships to not only our outgoing seniors going into college. We also have scholarship for continuing education for those who are already in college. And then we also have our newly branded Schoolie Awards, where we'll be supporting teachers who are nominated. So scan that code below, and we'll be glad to have you guys support us. So Terri, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This was wonderful, and we're going to have this recorded, and we're going to keep this this presentation on our LA Sigma's YouTube page for future reference and use. So did you want to close out with anything before we end this session?
Oh, no, I think we pretty much covered it. It's a lot of great information. And again,
Absolutely.
I hope it's of great value to all those listening. Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who joined us live today. This was a wonderful way to share a Saturday morning. And if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and close. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.